1 month down, we've got 11 to go. I'm 13 News meteorologist Matt Standridge. We want to be talking about what is February going to bring. We're going to take a look at some of the averages we typically get, some of the daylight changes, and some of the weather patterns we are expecting for this February. Good news for you, if you like more daylight, you're going to like February. In fact, February is our third biggest month for daylight gains. It's March, then April, and then February. Here are the zones. It increases as you go farther to the north. That's where we get bigger swings from more darkness or more daylight. But for southern Florida, good half hour is going to be added from February 1st to the 28th. And then these bands show you at least what you'll get. So in this light orange band, at least 50 minutes for much of Arkansas and Oklahoma and to Tennessee. But many folks can give it 55 or 56, but you're in that 50 range. Indiana, we're in that 60-minute range or greater. Right up to the border with Michigan, that's where they hit 70 minutes and it continues to increase. Far northern parts of the contiguous U.S. will get a good hour and 20 minutes or even a little bit more. That's the baseline once you get close to the Canadian border. So a lot more daylight is headed our way. In fact, most Americans are at least going to get about 2 minutes per day of extra daylight, especially the northern half of the U.S. will get about a minute and a half to minute 45 day after day once you get a little bit farther south. But finally, we're getting to the pace where you really do start to notice. You might have already started to know just a little bit for these extra long sunsets and daylight lasting just a touch longer, but you're really going to notice the changes for the month of February. Let's zoom in, just take a closer look at the state of Indiana. Big difference from north to south. Just about 69 minutes, just below that 70 mark there in South Bend, close to Notre Dame, 68 in Fort Wayne, closer to Indianapolis, about 64. That's kind of up and down I-70. 64 minutes we're gaining, and then right just barely in the 60-minute category for far southern Indiana there for Evansville. So some good changes on the way. Let's take a look at the sunrises and sunsets. We'll start with sunsets. 6 o'clock sunsets starting in February. We've got them. They start just at the end of January, and then all throughout February we've got 6 o'clock sunsets. By the end of the month we're just past 6:30, so you'll notice that difference. Then for sunrises, they keep getting earlier and earlier. Just before 8 o'clock we got sunrises February 1st, and then by the end of the month, we're getting closer to just 7 o'clock flat, but 7:18. This is all specifically for Indianapolis. What you have in your town will just differ slightly, but for the capital, an hour and 4 minutes. That's what we're gaining from February 1st to the 28th. So the reason why we go over these daylight changes, number one, it's kind of fun because we're always kind of searching for more daylight in the evenings, or maybe opposite. Maybe you really like the darkness. Maybe you get better sleep this time of year because the sun's not up all the time. Kind of fun to look at, but then also there are some real meteorological differences that take place because of our daylight changes. That's the reason why we even have weather and changes in the weather, is because we get constant changes with daylight and how much solar radiation we have heating our planet and how much is also trying to escape. And so these differences give us our storm systems. Let's talk about February, what we generally expect. A lot of days in the 40s. Not the first of the month, maybe a couple upper 30s, but most of the month should be spent in the 40s on average. Precipitation-wise, it's actually our driest month of the year. We start slowing things down just a little bit in February, but we can still get some impactful storms for sure. The actual precipitation, that's water equivalent. So if you melted down snow or you just took rain, that total combination together is just under 2.5 inches. That is our driest month of the year. A little bit of snow, a little bit of rain, but still on the colder side of things. Speaking of snow, we are now past the peak of our biggest snowfalls on average. We have had several years where February comes in from behind and really knocks us out with some snow. But here's a look on average throughout much of the winter. Just over 6 inches for December, just under 9 inches for January. February, we're right there at a half foot. This is on average. Every year is completely different, but we do start to see that downhill slide in the amount of snowy systems coming our way. And when the air is maybe not as cold going over the Great Lakes, or the Great Lakes are just colder themselves, or even become ice covered. We've got still some ice there, of course, on parts of Lake Michigan, which that will impact our lake effect snow chances. They all kind of come together to give us that downhill slide and more daylight, more heat for the rest of the winter and headed towards spring. So still a good month for snow, but we are definitely kind of on the backside of things. How much snow have we picked up so far all the way to February 1st? Well, take a look at this map. the heaviest snows have been in southern Indiana, parts of central Indiana, and then northern Indiana. There's this gap right in between, places that usually should get more snow. Fort Wayne, they're towards Tipton, Miami, parts of northwest Indiana. They're towards the region, Valpo, Crown Point, Maryville. They're not getting too much. They haven't picked up too much. We'll have to see if that changes. But we've had a decent amount of snow farther to the south, and then we've had finally some lake effect catch up. For a while, it was all southern Indiana and parts of central Indiana where the biggest snowfall totals have been. But throughout January, we finally got, especially the later half of the month with all the cold air, we were able to finally pick up some snow. So this is what we picked up so far, but you're asking, okay, how is this in relation to other winters? I've got you. Here's what we should get. Big difference. Southern Indiana has really overperformed. Now, could we get more snows? Sure. But we've really picked up more than our fair share of snow for the winter. Parts of central Indiana, Indianapolis, we're still below average. We're on track. We still should get a few more inches of snow, but we're on track so far for an average winter. But it's this area in north central Indiana where we've had that gap that we've got a long ways to go. Even some of these big storms, we've had earlier this year, especially in January, we had some sharp cutoffs where we had, half foot up to a foot or so. But then the cutoff was layered right towards Lafayette and kind of near Muncie and Kokomo. For just folks just north of that, we haven't really picked up very much. And a lot of the lake effect has not been north to south. A lot of these winds have been a little bit more west-northwest to east-southeast. So the heavier snows have been more towards South Bend. It's been hard to get it south of Warsaw or even towards LaPorte and Valpo. We've had more of those bands closer to Michigan. But this is what we get on average, so we've got a ways to go. Even northern Indiana, we are lacking on some of this snow. So we've got a ways to go, but southern Indiana, you have overperformed. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about what we typically see in a February. We usually start in the 30s, then we'll top out in the 40s by the end of the month. February 28th, about 45. So it's still cold, but we are starting to see some changes. We're starting to warm things up. Plus, on the cloud side, it's still pretty cloudy. Lakes are still open to help us produce clouds. We are one of the cloudiest parts of the whole nation this time of year, just as cloudy as the Pacific Northwest. In the Great Lakes, we are cloudy because of the water producing these extra clouds for us a lot of times. But January is our cloudiest month. February is right behind. So we're still in that cloudy pattern. But you do see some of those drops, and this is a combination of overcast and mostly cloudy. So the sky is definitely over 50% cloudy over 50% of the time. So still cloudy throughout February, but we're headed in the right direction. We're leaving the peak. February is also a windy month of the year. Going to Valpo, northwest Indiana, for meteorology school, we called it Windiana. And it's out there for a region. Average mile-per-hour winds throughout, all the time. We get gusts, and there are breaks, but you average everything together, it's over 10 miles per hour there in February, right at 11. So we're still in our windiest time of the year, and you feel it. And it's those winds that help produce more of those lake effect clouds and sometimes some lake effect snow. All right, so what is February looking like? A couple different things. It looks like the jet stream should keep itself a little bit farther north than what we saw in January, and that should typically be the case. You should be a little bit drier farther to the south where we had that monster snowstorm with record snowfalls. Some folks getting the most snow they've seen in over 100 years or just completely broke their records. I think it's going to be drier to the south. They should get a break. But we will see more active weather to the northwest. Here's the thing. Sometimes the jet stream spins so far to the south that some parts of the north haven't really gotten anything. They need some more water and some mountain snow as we head towards spring and summer to kind of fill up the mountains so that they can melt. But we'll see, I think, an above average pattern off to the north and west. So that's some good news. They're already wet this time of year, but they may be wetter. And then the Great Lakes, especially the southern and eastern Great Lakes, we're looking ahead to more precipitation, but I don't think it's all going to be snow. I do think there'll be a lot of times where it's kind of rain, snow mix, or even just rain, but we are expecting a little bit more activity compared to normal for February. Remember, just about 2.5 inches or so, water equivalent for both snow and rain put together. I think we'll get a little bit above that, and that's what we're thinking through the Climate Prediction Center. When it comes to temperature, Indiana's kind of on the edge. We are expecting cold days, we're expecting warm days, but compared to January, most of the month was very cold. In fact, we are on track, possibly when we get all the data, we're counting everything up. One of the coldest Januaries we've had since 2014, if not since 2014. Very, very cold. The end of the month was a little bit warmer, so that kind of helped things out. But this month we think, pattern jet stream kind of over us or just to the north should keep the coldest air to the north. Now we're going to get cold days and we're going to get warm days. Technically, there's a slight chance of slightly above average weather for Indianapolis, but that really is a trend farther to the south because I think we'll get a jet that kind of goes like this, and that kind of separates warm air from cold air north, warm air south. So if we get it about here, and I'll show you the pattern here in a moment, that should keep areas farther to the south, for example, Florida, after their cold January, they should be a lot warmer, and parts of the southwest should be warmer than average. But I do think we're going to start, getting that cooler air and more snow chances moving forward for parts of the north. All right, so put that all together. What are we expecting for February? This shows you the main jet stream, the polar jet, the real difference between cold air to the north, warm air to the south. There should be generally a slight tilt most days. Now, it moves every single day, but if you kind of took a picture of every single day, they kind of put them in a montage, most times you'll have a jet kind of starting over Seattle, dipping south towards the Dakotas, and coming towards Indiana, if not parts of northern Indiana, maybe more towards the trend just north of Indianapolis. This is the heart of the jet stream where a lot of times you'll get these clipper systems to pass on through. So we do have more chances for snow, we think. We think we're going to get several of these clippers. Now, many times the bulk of the snow on the clipper will probably be from Michigan and then parts of northern Indiana, northern Ohio, and into New York. But I do think we'll get some passing flurries at times with these clipper systems, and that's typical for this time of year. But I think we'll get a lot of them. A lot of times they're going to be on the weaker side, but we'll get some of these snow systems kind of passing on by. And then when you look off towards the south, we do think, southwest, we think there's going to be detachments a lot of times. Maybe a good 3 of them, powerful ones that try to form throughout the month. They can do a couple different things. Since they are detached from the coldest of air, they can provide a wintry mess of rain and snow, and maybe some ice too. They'll start in the Rockies and then they'll kick up. And depending on where that northern jet stream is to supply it with cold air, we'll have to see. But I do think we're going to get maybe 2 or 3 decent systems that dip south and kind of hook right through and then come towards the Midwest. Now, if they dip through and go just west of Indiana, that keeps Indiana warmer and wetter. If they are able to kind of swing more this way, that'll keep Indiana a little bit on the snowy side. But this is a pattern where we do think there are several chances for some rain and snow for February. January is mainly just snow for us over and over again. But I do think we'll get a mix, but the pattern does look active. And if the coldest air is farther to the north, as they're moving eastbound, there's probably going to be a higher severe weather threat for parts of the southern plains, parts of the Ozarks, really more towards the Ouachitas, and parts of the Mississippi Delta and closer to the Gulf Coast. So they'll switch snow out for possibly more severe weather. And severe weather season is starting for the deep south for February. So these kind of systems help spark severe weather to the south, but possibly wintry mixes for much of the Midwest. So we are expecting overall an active February. We'll ride it out with you storm by storm as it comes through. Winter's going to hold on, but it shouldn't be as cold as January was.